choice for today's book review, which will be Sisterhood Everlasting by Brashares. First is my sunburn triangle. Yes, I made the mistake of sitting outside and not putting sunblock on, and so yes, I'm aware. Two is today's gonna be a struggle. It wasn't the best of days. It was one of those days that made me seriously question my life's trajectory and all the things that I'm trying to do professionally, one of which is this channel. It's one of those days that makes me look long and hard at what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. It seems that no matter what I do, I can't seem to get where I want to get. So that is just to say, I don't know the future of this channel. I have enough reviews already done to last me some time. I really enjoy, I get satisfaction and fulfillment from talking about books. But it's hard to speak into thin air, especially since this takes a lot of time. And if that time can be used elsewhere, that might be what I have to do. So, yeah. I honestly don't know what's gonna happen with this review, but I'm gonna get through it, and we'll get through it. So, as I said, Sisterhood Everlasting by Brashares. It is my favorite of the series. Oh my gosh, this just looks worse and worse, doesn't it? It takes place 10 years after the last book. The major spoiler here is that Tibi has died. A number of years earlier, she and Brian had moved to Australia for his job. It came out of nowhere. She didn't tell anybody. The intention was to come home after a few months, but a few months turned into a few years, and a few months was also as long as it took for Tibi to stop responding to her friends. It turns out that she got pregnant. In the testing, she learned that she had Huntington's disease. She simply didn't know how to tell people. I don't know what all of this means in terms of her family, because by the time that the other three girls learn all of this, her daughter Bailey is almost 2. So I don't know what her family knows. I don't know if they didn't know she had a kid or if they simply hadn't met Bailey. I don't know if they knew about Huntington's, because when her parents come to view the body, they don't want any autopsies done. They just want her cremated. And that could be because they knew the reason. In terms of B, Lena, and Carmen, they are under the assumption that Tibi had killed herself. And this is something that I don't know how many times I read this book, even though eventually flat out stated it wasn't suicide. I guess I missed that. The lead up to all this is we get glimpses as to what's going on in all the girls' lives, and it's kind of depressing. On that note, actually, I'm gonna meander a bit and talk about how I honestly don't know why this is my favorite book, because it's not the most uplifting. It's not even YA. I read somewhere that, I think it was something that Brashares said, was that she had contemplated breaking up Bridget and Eric and then having Bridget get together with Brian, which I am morally opposed to. Not morally, but it sounded good. I am staunchly opposed to. Bridget belongs with Eric, and Tibi, whether she's alive or dead, belongs with Brian. And it just is a weird combination for me to think of those two together. And so as I was trying to find this little tidbit of information, I ran across some absolutely scathing reviews about this book. And it's not that they're wrong, but I don't think they're completely right. One of them, honestly, both of them, I felt came at it from very personalized agendas, which I know a lot of what I say is opinion, but I don't feel like I say, well, like, one girl is a feminist, obviously feminist, and so all of her thoughts about why this book was so bad was because of her feminist perspective. And I don't feel like that's a good scope in which to review a book from, because that's not necessarily about the writing and the story so much as you don't like the way that Brashares portrayed her characters. Anyways, I thought it was hilarious. I guess I'm not enough of a feminist to say she's completely right. I see her point in which if you want to read, or the lens, that's what it was, not scope, lens. If you want to read this book through that lens, then yes, it's not a good story, because it's essentially saying that, like, Carmen is the only one who does not, I guess, center herself around a man in a sense, and she is all about her career. Then in the end, she's the one who doesn't have a man and doesn't have what she wants because she doesn't have a man and blah, blah, blah. Whereas B and Lena have sort of lived nothing lives because they've been pining over men and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, sure, if you want to look at it that way, it could be a terrible book because we're saying that women are nothing without men. Honestly, I don't think that way. I don't think it's that at all. But I don't necessarily like romance, but I like a romantic perspective. And I enjoy the fact that Bridget is still with Eric despite how young they were. I do think the girl had a point about Lena and Costas because, honestly, that relationship just has issues in my opinion. So that's my little tangent on that, as to a lot of people didn't like this book simply because it has a completely different tone and is for a completely different age group. But what do you expect? The girls who are now women who started with the original 4 are gonna be of this age now. So it's not inappropriate. I guess it's more inappropriate for the teenage girls who have recently discovered the series. But the deal is the girls are portrayed in their lives, which are all relatively depressing. Lena, and this goes back to things that I've said about how these girls have zero character arc, like zero character development. Lena, at the end of Forever in Blue, had sort of patched things up with Costas, and we have this theoretical future for them. A happy note. She seemed to have grown some balls finally and started to figure herself out and discover herself as a female. Same with Carmen. Carmen is finally taking charge of her own life. Obviously, Bridget, I didn't care for Bridget's storyline. But in general, she had a really good trajectory, and it was her coming to terms with her family life, what she wants for her own life, and sort of enriching her family. However, Bridget is the only one that seems to kind of have things together, but then again, she doesn't have things together because she's just a temp, and she's always seeking the sun. So, like, in one instance, Eric came home to a place they didn't live anymore because she found a sunnier place and moved all of their stuff without telling him. She's constantly losing her phone, and she's always donating all of her stuff to the homeless, which isn't a bad thing, but you're like, what? And then there's Carmen, who has continued with the acting thing, and she is in a relationship with a really toxic guy. That's the one thing I don't understand, is Carmen is such a strong woman, yet she is in a relationship with a man who doesn't get along with her friends don't approve of, who doesn't respect her, and she refuses to acknowledge it. Even though I said, like, she doesn't definitely have a man, that her life is all about her career, she does technically have a man that she then gets engaged to. And I mean, there's so many red flags that I'm surprised she didn't see, kind of like when she's sitting down and she's trying to write out her invitations, and she's like, should I send them to my best friends? Because I know what they're gonna say when they find out that we're getting married. Like, that's a huge red flag. These are your lifelong friends. They're like your sisters, yet you're afraid to invite them to your wedding because you know how they feel about your fiance. And then there's Lena, who, nothing. Still the most boring character known to man. She was a superstar in college, enough so that she's the only graduate student that they offered a job to, yet she's gone nowhere. She speaks to no one. She's in a relationship with a guy who works at a sandwich shop, which I'm not trying to downplay that. We all need jobs, and hello, I like it when people make my sandwiches. But she don't like him. She sees no future with him, and she admits she's settling to be with him. Well, I'm like, where are any of these girls going 10 years after the fact? And then Tibi, we honestly don't know what she's doing. We know that Brian has been quite successful, and Tibi in some senses was pursuing being a filmmaker, documentarian, but we don't know what she has achieved other than she moved to Australia with Brian. So we get these really depressing looks at these girls' presents and how they miss each other, but they keep missing each other, even though Carmen and Lena talk, because there's only 3 people that call Lena: Carmen, Effie, and her mother. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's not that people are calling me, but I still have a brighter social life than that. So even though Carmen and Lena do talk, it's almost like a formality that they're not necessarily keeping in touch because they're sisters. So they're all very, very excited when they receive long awaited for letters from Tibi. She texts them and it says, look, something's coming in the mail, be ready. And in the mail are tickets to Greece. They get there and they're all super excited, only to wait at the airport, and Tibi never shows up. They're like kind of freaking out and they have no idea what to do. And then the people at the airport are like, well, we gotta go because we're leaving, it's lunchtime. And so they're trying to figure out, what do we do? Do we stay? Do we go? Like, are we gonna cross paths with her? They end up going and they're staying at Lena's grandparents' house because now her grandmother has also died. And they realize, yeah, okay, so Tibi's been here. We see her stuff, her presents, but where is she? And they wait, and she never shows up. And eventually they call the police, and the police tell them she's not been missing long enough. But then the next morning, policemen show up and say, we found a body in the caldera. It is Tibi. Tibi's parents come to Greece and do all the stuff. Her mother comes to look over her things, and then she's like, look, this bag is not for me, it's for you. The girls realize that Tibi had been wanting to reenact their pants ceremony, the traveling pants ceremony. Amongst all of this stuff, there's a letter plus letters for all of them. I guess it's this initial letter that leads them to believe that she killed herself. And I just never got that. It slips past me every single time, even though I know it's coming. It's all very ambiguous, and it's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing, because I remember my first, even my second read, going through the entire book, wondering why these girls are so upset with Tibi. What did Tibi do that was so bad? And it's because they were under the impression that she killed herself, when in actuality, she was sicker than she thought, and she hadn't expected to die so soon, but she ended up going swimming in the caldera and she couldn't make it out. That's what happened. Those are the big spoilers. The girls, and this is, I distinctly remember this series bothering me because of the lack of communication amongst the girls. It's funny because I didn't really notice it this read through, but it's definitely in this book. And it bothers me so much because the girls are sisters, yet they can't lean on each other. They won't talk to each other. They're all like, we're gonna go our own way and deal with it on our own. And I'm like, that's so unhealthy. It goes back to another issue that plagues me when I read this series, is how heavy it gets. The internalization, the internal thoughts that happen with these girls is really weighty. And it is exceptionally weighty in this book. I understand why they're not talking to each other, because they don't want to see something in the other girls that has them either needing to step up or making them feel worse. So I'm not arguing why they don't talk. I mean, I am, but I'm not. But it's just, oh my gosh, if only these girls would just lean on each other the way they're supposed to because of what they claim to be. What happens with Bridget is she gets home and Eric surprises her with a bed, like a bedroom set, and she is so upset. Because as I said, she donates everything. She wants to be so carefree, so not tied down. And having a bed makes things harder. She's like, oh my gosh, this is not what I want. And she ends up leaving. She walks out that door and she like bums it, literally bums it around San Francisco for I think a couple days. Then she realizes, I need my bike. So she goes to her house, and Eric, knowing that she would do this, has enabled her to access her bike. She gets on it and she just pedals. She ends up going to her brother Perry's house, which is some odd hours away. I'm just saying, Bridget Vreeland is the most athletic person I've ever encountered in my life. I do not understand how she, I mean, hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of miles of just riding her bike. She camps out with him and his wife, Violet. And I enjoyed seeing Perry because I felt like he was a non-entity throughout this entire series. And there comes a point where, what is the point? Why do we have characters if they don't mean anything? So it was really great to see his growth, because obviously whatever she did, whatever she instigated at the end of Forever in Blue had an impact on him, so that he is living a full life now. But Bridget overhears a little conversation about what's going on with her. Do we know what's happening? Does Eric know what's happening? And so she says, it's time for me to go. She ends up at this other town. She's in a bar and she almost has a one-night stand with someone, and then she realizes, not the best idea. However, this also leads her to realize that maybe she should get herself some protection. So she goes to a Planned Parenthood. There she realizes, she learns she's pregnant. She's like, what? No. I sympathize with her. This was something else that one of these other reviewers was like, the stereotypicalness, the clichédness of a woman not having a choice about what to do with her own body and her own baby and whatever. Be pro-choice, be pro-life. I don't think it was the right lens to read this book through. That's not what this book is about. But if that is important to you, maybe this is not the book for you, because it is more traditionalist in its views on relationships. Eventually, what Bridget does is she doesn't know what to do about this baby. She initially wants to get rid of it. And then the nurse, whose name turns out to be Tabitha, and Bridget takes this as a sign, says, sit on it. You have some time. Think about it. I've been through this situation with other girls, and it's best if you think about it, if you consider it, and you talk to your boyfriend. Bridget obviously doesn't talk to Eric. She just keeps on writing. She ends up doing some odds and ends, and then she realizes, I need to find Brian. I need to get some answers. So she goes to Eric for money, goes to find Brian, learns about Bailey, and then through this has a revelation about what she had initially wanted to do to her unborn child. Yeah, so then Bridget goes to Australia and Brian is surprised, to say the least. And then they have some issues because he doesn't realize that she, Lena, and Carmen think that Tibi killed herself. He also doesn't realize that they never actually got to talk to her. They didn't get to see her before she died. She tries to ask him questions that he's not ready to answer. And then eventually things come out and understandings are made and whatever. But what happens is Brian, like, he and Tibi had been planning to come back to the States. But what he has is he has a project he has to finish. And so he asks her, can you watch Bailey while I finish this up, while I prepare to return us to the States? She does. And she has no maternal instinct because she had all those issues in her own childhood with her own mother. And so taking care of Bailey is frightening for her, but apparently Bailey is a mini-me of Tibi. Brian's like, just look at her as a little you. I guess B kind of regressive to who she had been as a child and kind of appreciating the fact that she got a second chance with one of her best friends. That happens, and then they go back to the States, and the whole thing about the letters. Oh my gosh. Kind of in the best and the worst ways. I don't think I could have waited as long as these girls waited. But then again, they were traumatized. They were upset. Probably not the first thing on their mind is to read letters from their dead best friend. But I'm like, just open the freaking letters, will you? Tibi had written each girl a letter, and the end instructions, like, some of them had one letter, and it was like, here's the end game. Others had a letter within a letter within a letter. But the end game was always to get them to Pennsylvania, which I guess the plan was, let's go to Greece, spend time together, and then I give you these letters. Then we have this mystery end. I guess in a way it would all kind of turn out the same, but the way that her letters were written almost perpetuated the belief that she had committed suicide, because she talks about being weak. They end up in Pennsylvania, and the farm that they have purchased has enough room, has enough surrounding buildings to provide places for all of the girls to basically bring them back together. So we're coming full circle from girls who have sort of lost each other to girls who have found each other again. They get to Pennsylvania, and she ends up calling Eric and says, I need to tell you something, even though you're in San Francisco. He hops on a flight, and there we go. We're led to believe that he is going to transfer to New York, and New York is close enough that I guess they could essentially live on this farm, and he could just travel in every now and again. Let's go to Lena, because as much as I despised Lena this read through in the entire series, I remember loving her because of her romance with Costas. All I wanted was a resolution to them being together. We finally get that here. What turns out is Lena ends up taking care of everything in Greece. She has been working on her Greek, so she's like, okay, I can do this. And then she realizes, no, I can't. She reaches out to Costas, who has become this financial superstar, this guy up in the stratosphere who she's convinced has forgotten about her, which, oh my gosh, can she be more self-centered? Honestly, there's this one point where she seeks him out, and she looks at herself in the mirror, and she's like, you were once considered a great beauty. What has happened to you? Why didn't you appreciate it when you could? Blah, 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 blah. I feel like she has continued to fall back on this idea that she's so pretty that she has to uglify herself. She has to stay enough in the shadows so that people won't pay too much attention to her. And I don't know, maybe you're one of those girls. Maybe you're a pretty girl who knows exactly how this feels. How you try to step back because you get too much attention otherwise. Majority of us, we don't have that problem. She and Costas kind of reconnect. They go their separate ways, and she just continues to withdraw. She is honestly the dullest person known to man. She really is. Finally, it is Christmas. She is going to be visited by her sister Effie. However, because she neglects to answer her phone or listen to her messages, she doesn't know Effie is coming until Effie's almost there. If only to prove she is the most boring person on the entire planet in the world of literature, or just in general. She commits, she vows to be the most boring person ever. to do whatever it takes to make Effie so bored that she will leave as soon as possible. Then they end up getting into an argument because Effie obviously is very sensitive towards Lena'S relationship with her friends and how she feels like Lena has always put her friends first. They're at dinner and Lena is like, when can this be over? I'm so miserable. Effie expresses her sorrow as to Lena's loss of Tibi. And Lena is like, she loses it. She gets so angry because she doesn't believe Effie's sincerity. And then Effie gets mad at her and is like, you haven't forgiven me for this and this and this and blah, blah, blah. So they blow up and there you go. Lena has nobody else to talk to. I guess her mom kind of calls her every now and again, but like she knows well enough that Lena's not going to answer. But then Lena remembers the letter. Oh, should I open it? Should I not open it? She opens it and inside is a letter for her and is a letter for Costas. The idea is Tibi wants her to face her fear. She wants her to deliver this letter to Costas personally. Lena tracks him down to London, where he has been living and working. She wears this dress and is attempting to blow him away. Of course, she fails miserably because she doesn't know how to blow anybody away because she's the most boring person ever. So I'm like, I don't blame him for moving on. But her reaction to the idea that Costas didn't mean someday that he would dare to be in a relationship with somebody else 10 years after the fact, after she stopped talking to him, after she stood him up when he asked her to come visit him, and at the very last minute, she didn't get on the plane, he dares to move on? Oh my freaking goodness. But she gets to his very nice house, only to have it answered by a very intimidating woman with a ring on a very important finger, and she does. She gives this woman this letter. You know, she sees Costas coming down the stairs and they're obviously going somewhere because they're all dressed up. So she gives the letter and then she runs away because she's not only the most boring person ever, but she's also the most chicken person ever. This is something I don't quite understand. I think Costas saw her, which is why she ran away. He doesn't come after her. However, hours upon hours upon hours later, when she has made her way back to the airport, he calls her and he's like, where are you? Why did you come here? Let me see you. And I'm thinking, why did you wait so long? Lena says, absolutely freaking not, because I'm not worthy of you. Her words and mine. What he does is he starts writing to her. And they start a pen pal thing, and she's like, well, maybe this is what we're meant for. We're not meant to be together. We're just meant to be pen pals, because she's so melodramatic. And I'm like, although, honestly, I enjoyed these moments. I liked, as I've said, I like when Costas is in the picture. He makes Lena interesting. He brings her out of her shell. He gives her personality. So I actually liked them doing this pen pal thing, except her ability to have a pity party is bar none. The letters become more involved and they start sending little things that just go beyond a basic friendship. It's just kind of reawakening feelings. And he ends up saying something about how his greatest joy is waking up knowing he'll have a letter from her. And what if he could just wake up to her? And obviously that sends Lena into a panic attack, only for I think the next day, just a short little letter saying, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, Costas, you're a brave soul, but I wish you wouldn't backtrack, okay? Don't let Lena off the hook. You know how she is. I do like that Lena acknowledges how many times he's broken her heart, but how many times she has broken his. So it's not like she's trying to place all the blame on him. But still, I did agree with one of the reviewers on that point of, why are you still pining for him? Except for the fact that he's the one that got away. They had no resolution in any way, so I could see why she at least is hanging on to it. But why is he? He is such a capable guy who has so much going for him, and obviously he's trying to move on. And as much as I feel like she has rejected him, he broke her heart because she broke his first. They started dating at the end of the first novel, and soon after that, she cut it off, which led him to try to drown his sorrows in another woman, who then claimed to be pregnant, which is why the romance that he and Lena resumed in book 2 got cut short, because he had to do what was right. We get a whole year without him, only for him to turn back up in book 4 and say, I'm so sorry, and then she loses her cool on him. And I'm like, who's the villain here? Not Costas, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm just like, Costas, why are you holding on to this girl who has made it very clear she's not into this? Not that she's not into you, but she's not into this relationship. Time and again has made it clear she wants you to stop. Obviously, Lena is one of those people who you have to read between the lines, like, I'm talking, let's get out our invisible ink kind of stuff, because it's really not there. If a guy was that flighty and hot and cold with me, I'm not holding on. Part of me might hold on to that youthful romance, one who got away thing, but honestly, I'm moving on. Eventually, she realizes what she needs to do is go to him. She needs to go all the way. She returns to London in a persona much more suited to who she was. So the first time she went after him to give him the letter, she was trying to be someone she thought he'd like. And then when she comes the second time, she comes as someone much more confident in herself and ready to take on what might be coming, only to realize he's not there. She has no way to figure out where he is. It turns out the woman who answered the door wasn't his fiance. She just had a nice ring on an important finger. And she tells Lena that they've split up, but she got to keep the house, which I'm like, yeah. Then he calls her. She's at the airport again. He's saying, where are you? And she's like, I'm in London. Where are you? And he's like, I'm knocking on your front door. Where are you? Basically, they both were trying to go all the way. They both wanted to put 100% in. They decide to meet in Pennsylvania. They finally get to consummate their relationship. Sunshine and rainbows, and they're gonna figure things out. Happy dunky? Hunky dory. So now on to Carmen. I honestly thought Carmen was pretty boring in this book until towards the end, like mid to the end, because I did not understand who she was. I didn't understand why she was with Jones, her boyfriend slash fiance. I didn't understand why she was making the decision she was, because she was no longer spunky Carmen. And maybe that was the point, was her desire to fit in to this Hollywood lifestyle, although it wasn't actually Hollywood considering she's living in New York. But this acting lifestyle has sort of stripped her, just like in the last book, of her identity. Her dad comes to visit, and we learn that Lydia has died, his wife, her stepmom. She had died of cancer recently. Paul, who I really wished that Paul had had a bigger role in this series. He was an unsung hero. I actually kind of entertained the idea of Carmen and Paul being together, although honestly, that's not a relationship that should happen. They get along really well, but I was like, what if? Anyways, we learned that Paul had been in Afghanistan and he has now come home. And then Krista has started a family and sort of achieved things that Carmen is sort of jealous of, only because it means that her father is kind of getting what maybe he wants from a daughter. The dad has come to visit and he's diminished in a way. She's seeing him and she's like, is that really my dad? I always thought him in this light and now I'm seeing him this way. And I'm like, who is that guy? And so I thought that was really interesting, really telling. I would have enjoyed more of that. But I enjoyed how they are still trying to keep their relationship alive considering where they started. Then she questions whether or not she wants to marry Jones. She voices it, and he basically guilts her into continuing. He's like, well, you might want to act this way, and you may not want to do this, but I'm not a quitter, blah, blah, blah. This is what Tibi would want. She ends up going forward with it. And then they spend Christmas at his parents' place in California. Then she learns that there is there's a movie that is being auditioned for in New Orleans, and they want to see her. Her flight is at a certain time, but she has opened Tibi's letter only to find that Tibi has gifted her with a brand new iPhone, which I think this is so funny. The book, I think, was published in 2013, so it's sort of on that burgeoning, that cusp of what we're experiencing with social media and smartphones and living our lives through a screen. And so Carmen is on that forefront. They facetiously say if she could have her iPhone surgically attached to her arm, she would. She goes to get her phones switched only to realize that it doesn't work, but it puts her behind so that when she gets home, the car is already waiting for her. They hit massive traffic. She misses her flight. There are no more flights. So she ends up taking a train. And this is where I start to like Carmen again, because she becomes Carmen again. She gets on this train and she has nothing to entertain herself with. And when she finally is able to sort of figure out her phone, the problem is she has no mothership in which to plug it into. So she is without a phone. She only has a magazine that she's already read cover to cover. And across the way is this Hispanic family, a dad and 2 young children. And she's just like, oh my gosh, being a diva, ruining the fact that this is what she's going to have to put up with for however long the train ride is. She ends up bonding with this family and learning the tragic past behind what's happened to them and why they are going where they're going. And through that, she starts to remember and to realize where she came from, what she wants from life, who's important to her. Then she gets to New Orleans and she botches her audition only because it's supposed to be comedic, but she is in such a headspace that she brings tears to it. So even though she botches that, the director tells her that he wants her for something. So it's not like she's botched her career. She's just not going to get into that movie with Matt Damon. And then she says, I'm going to go to Pennsylvania. I know Jones said not to do it, but you know what? I'm not going to marry Jones anymore, so he doesn't really matter. So she goes to Pennsylvania, they all reunite and blah, 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 and happily ever after. You get the impression that they're kind of maybe all going to relocate to Pennsylvania and live on this farm. Whatever. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's maybe a little unrealistic, but whatever. It's fiction. I wanted to address one more thing, and that is the letters. One of the reviewers that I read made this big stink about the sentimentality of the letters because Tibi wasn't necessarily sentimental. But you gotta think of it like this. She's on her deathbed-ish. She's dying. She has neglected her sister friends for 2-3 years. She knows she needs to bring them all together to talk to them, to this, to do that. And so, okay, maybe her ability to call each and every one of their reactions when they read these letters is a bit much. But then again, if they're as close as they're supposed to be, I think it's plausible for Tibi to know how they would react to what she says in her letters. And I honestly, it has never bothered me. I have never once, and we know I do this all the time, I never once was like, that's not a character for Tibi to write these letters like this. Because she's reflective. She's seen the end of her life. She's seen what she's lost with her best friends. She's also trying to comfort them with what is to come. Anyways, I think what I loved about this book was also kind of what I hated in that the grief was so overwhelming. I do wish that maybe it hadn't dragged on so long, but I thought that Brashares' portrayal of their grief was beautiful. It impacts me every single time because it feels so real. It feels like something that is, and with each girl in turn, no matter how boring I think Lena is, she internalized all that she's feeling, and that's true to Lena. Bridget ran away. That's true to Bridget. Carmen kind of just ignored it and tried to move on with her life. And that's not necessarily Carmen-like. Carmen is dramatic. Carmen creates a fuss when things aren't going her way. But then again, I guess the death of someone that close to her could elicit a different kind of response. I'm a bit proud of myself because I think I did better than I expected, because honestly, I wasn't in the mood to talk about a book. I'm in the mood to eat ice cream and have a margarita and just like go to sleep, you know, just not to have to think about what's going on in my own life. This is a poignant, heart-wrenching book, and I know some people are gonna hate the fact that Tibi dies. I kind of love it. I've grown to love when characters we love die because it elicits an emotion. It makes you feel something, and I think that's kind of what needed to happen. There would be no more story. Like, if all four girls were living happily ever after, we don't need to see them. But they've had one more thing happen in their lives that has to do with their friendship and their development as people. So I like the route that Brashares went with this. Hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you until I don't see you anymore. Bye.